What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Got a quick video. Well, this might have to be a two-part video. I'm not sure yet. It might get pretty long, but who knows. First off, my subscribers, once again, I want to thank you for supporting me. Any newcomers, welcome. I just ask if you like this story to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and also leave a comment. I would appreciate it, bad or good. Now, I told you last time, my last video, I was going to tell you a story about my foster son. How he was murdered and dismembered. And the guy responsible, he did about 8 months county time. It goes like this. Around 2009, 2010, when my son was in school, there was a little kid. It was his friend. And one day it was at a back to school night or something. Something was going on. But I met this kid's parents. And they wanted to set up a play date so him and my son can hang out more. I didn't know anything about them, but I agreed. I was going to be there anyway with them. So I agreed. To be honest, I don't even remember, but my son told me that it did happen. But I remember talking to him. I don't remember the play date. Anyhow, after that was the last time I saw the kid. Now, I volunteered with the school a lot. I used to chaperone on field trips, help set up for carnivals, fundraisers, stuff like that. That's one of the reasons why I don't show my face. A lot of them don't know my history, my background. And I still have a kid that's in 6th grade. And I feel that if anyone found out, they wouldn't let me help the school anymore. So that's one of the reasons why I don't show my face. Anyways, I didn't see this kid anymore. And my son didn't speak anything, about him anymore. It's just like one of those things. I just thought he might have transferred schools or something, went to a different school. But like in 2019, my son tells me that he saw him, he talked to him, and he told him to come by and hang out. And so he told me that he was going to come by, and I said, yeah, that's cool. I remember him. That's cool. They were talking about making a podcast. This was before I even heard of a podcast. And my son's into making music. He has some tracks out there on TikTok. If you're interested, he goes by Young Flipper. And so he comes over and he hangs out. And it got late, so my son asked if he could spend the night. I said, yeah, that's cool. You guys got room for him? That's cool. He stayed the night. He took off the next day. It went on like this for a couple months. Then in November, right at Thanksgiving, he stayed the night. The night before Thanksgiving, he stayed the night. And my son asked if, on Thanksgiving Day, asked if we can go drop him off. I said, yeah, that's cool. I figured he was going home. So we ended up taking him to another friend's house. And I asked my son, isn't he going to go home and eat with his family? He said he couldn't go home. Now me, I'm always looking out for my son and his friends, even to this day. They call me if they get drunk or something, and I pick them up, take them home. Or me and my wife would go and I drive them home if they have a car, so they don't have to drive. And anyways, he told me he couldn't go home, that his family would get in trouble if he was caught there or something like that. Now, hold on, let me reverse for a minute. Before Thanksgiving, I took him home, which I thought it was his house, but it turned out that he was in a foster home. And one night came. It was on Christmas. I remember around Christmas time because we went to go see the lights, the houses on Candy Cane Lane. And my son told me, let's go pick him up. He said, but we'll park on the street and I'll call him and he'll come out. So we parked on the street. I called him. He came out. Turns out that that was a foster home and he was running away from it. And we picked him up. Now, I didn't know this till after, when it was time for me to take him home. When I was taking him home, he had me drop him off someplace else. And I told him, well, I thought you lived over here. He said, no, I don't live over there no more. He went to another house. It was another foster home that he was staying. A couple of days later, same thing happened. Picked him up. And same thing, we waited on the street, waited for him to come out. He comes out with his backpack, his clothes and stuff. He ended up leaving that one. So later on, I found out that he was in the foster care program. He was in the foster care care. And every time I would pick him up, he was leaving a foster home. So he would run away from these homes. And a couple of times, the cops picked him up and would take him. And there was one time when the cops picked him up, and when they were taking him somewhere, he stopped and asked if they can get him something to eat. So they stopped at McDonald's, and he took off. He got away from the cops, called me up, and we went and picked him up while the cops were looking for him. It's kind of like I was aiding and abetting a fugitive or something like that, a runaway. So he stayed at our house a couple of times, which led up to the Thanksgiving day when I went to go drop him off at another friend's house. And I told my son, isn't he gonna go eat with his family? He said no, he couldn't, that they would get in trouble. And I said, so where's he gonna go? He says he's gonna stay at a friend of theirs' house. His name is Sergio, put it that way. So I don't have to keep saying he. So I told him, well, where does he live? Where's he living right now? He says, nowhere. So where does Sergio stay? He says, nowhere. He just stays wherever. So I tell him, you mean he's homeless? He said, basically, yeah. He just goes to different friends' house and stays the night, a couple of days if he can. So I looked at my wife and she looked at me and I said, that's not right. And she gave me that look like, we got to do something, you know. And so I told my son, well, look it, get back in touch with him and tell him to come over here to our house, come back to our house, or we'll pick him up. And he's going to come and eat with us. He said, all right. So he got back in touch with him. During that time when he was out doing whatever he was doing, I was talking to my wife and I said, you know, this ain't right. He can't be living on the streets like that. So she said, yeah, I know, I was thinking the same thing. So I said, I'm going to tell him to stay here if he wants to. And she said, yeah, I was just thinking that too. Kind of had a feeling you were thinking that way. I said, yeah. So he comes back over that evening. And I talked to my son. I said, look, I said, he doesn't have nowhere to stay. Tell him he can stay here if he wants to. Till he's 18. Then he has to get a job. And he can stay here. If he gets a job, he can stay here till he's ready to move out. And so my son had talked to him, and he was happy about that. He was all for it. I told him the rules, and he said that was cool. Now, one thing about me is I used to run in the streets. So I know what kids their age do. So as long as they didn't do no drugs, no hard drugs, I didn't have no problem with it. Whatever they're going to do, they were going to do it, you know, in the backyard or wherever. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. As long as there was no hard drugs, no coke, no heroin, no methamphetamine, none of that, it was cool. I had their back. So he ended up staying with us on Thanksgiving Day, 2019. Stayed with us until 2020 when he turned 18. This was in October 2020. He stayed with us. When he was 18, he moved out. He got an apartment. He got an apartment through the foster care program. Now, how they did it was when they turned 18, they would give them a place to stay, an apartment, and they had to maintain a job. So he got a job, and the only thing that they required was they had to have a roommate who was also under the foster care program. So he got a roommate, and it was cool for a little while. You know, he used to tell us, you know, he felt like he was, you know, going somewhere in life. He had a job, and he was excited about that. But through that, you know, that whole time he was staying with us, you know, he was like one of my boys. Didn't treat him no different. He got whatever they got. If they did something they weren't supposed to, and I told him they weren't going out, they weren't going nowhere, he wouldn't go. He went by my rules. And my rules, they weren't strict. Trust me. You know, I know about street life. I know all that. So my rules weren't strict. And he followed them. So now he felt like, you know, he was an adult now. He got his own place, or got his place with his roommate. And it was cool. We'd go down there and visit him. The boys would go down there and stay the night with him. But after a while, his roommate moved in his girlfriend. And one of the rules with the foster care program is nobody can stay in their apartment but them. They can have visitors, but nobody can actually move in. And him and his roommate used to get into it about that. He would tell his roommate, if they find out, they're going to get evicted. And the roommate, he didn't pay it no mind. He just kept his girlfriend there. And she was underage too. And he kept tying him. Sergio kept tying him. You know, she's going to get us kicked out. So they would get into arguments about it. You know, she was basically a bum. She wouldn't do shit, wouldn't clean up, nothing. And he would tell him, you know, tie your girl, she's going to be staying here. She's going to get us kicked out. And if we got to risk that, then she's got to start cleaning up or something. Get a job just like them or something. She wasn't doing shit. So they would get into arguments. And one time they almost got into a fight. So Sergio calls us and we go pick him up. He stayed the night, took him back home. And my boys stayed there with him just to chill. So I go pick up my boys the next day. And a couple of days after that, nobody has heard from him. Nobody can get in contact with him. He hadn't called nobody. Every time somebody would try to call him, somebody would answer his phone, but they wouldn't say nothing. So eventually his foster mom, the one I met at the school, she came to my house. And she told me, has anyone heard from him? We said, no, we haven't heard from him for a few days. And she said, this is not like him. He would call me every day, tell me good night. He hasn't called me in 2-3 days. And I try to call him, and somebody's answering his phone. They're just not saying nothing. She goes, so I know something ain't right. So we end up making flyers, posting them everywhere around all the little towns around Fresno, all around Fresno. People would call in and say they think they might have saw him or had him on surveillance, but it turned out it wasn't him. And this went on for a few days. And I thought back, the only problems he was having was with his roommate. So during this time of him missing, his foster mom gave me his biological mom's number, and I called her, just to talk to her and see if they got any info, and they hadn't. So we stayed in contact. Every day I would call, sometimes twice a day, and see if there's any information. Nothing. Nobody's heard from him, but people would still try to call him, and somebody was still answering his phone. And they would they pinged his phone or try to track his phone, and it was just like he was everywhere outside of Fresno. Wherever his phone was going, it was almost like somebody stole his phone, or whoever had his phone, whoever knew where he was at, or if it was even him. After a while, we thought that it might have been him. He just was having girl problems or something, and just didn't want to talk to nobody. So I was thinking back, and I called his biological mom, and I told her, "Hey, did he ever mention anything about his roommate having problems with him?" And she said, "Yeah, he mentioned it, but we talked to his roommate, and his roommate, he sounds like he's being honest. He hasn't heard from him. He hasn't been home. Um, he's offered to help hang up flyers, offered to call around, look for him." And I said, well, something don't add up. Has anyone went inside of his apartment?" And she said, "Well, that his brothers and sisters went a couple times to his apartment, and to find out if he's been there." And his roommate would tell him, "No, he hasn't came home. He hasn't heard from him." I said, "Well, I know they've been having some problems, and I think he knows what happened. I think there's something that he's not telling you guys." I said, "I think I'm gonna go to his house. I'm gonna go to his apartment. I'm gonna talk to Sergio's roommate." I said, "And if he knows something, he's gonna say what he knows. Plain and simple. He's gonna talk. I'll be able to tell if he's lying or telling the truth, but he's gonna say something." And she said, "Well, she don't think it was a good idea. She didn't think it was a good idea because if we made him feel like we knew something, that he knew something, then he might leave. And if he does know anything, he's gonna leave and he's gonna hide from the cops and he's gonna get away." Now, everybody should know what my intentions were, and I think back at it now, and it's kind of good in a way that we didn't go, because it was gonna be all bad for his roommate, but in the long run, it would have been all bad for us, for me, if we would have did something. And at that moment, the way I was thinking, it was gonna be all bad. Let's put it that way. I don't want to say too much. So we ended up not going because his biological mom told us that she didn't think we should. That he might leave and get away. If he knows something, he's gonna get away with it. So I was pretty heated about that. This was like my boy. He stayed with us almost a year, a whole year. And you know, we considered him family. I considered him my boy. I would take him to my family's house and introduce him as my boy. You know, so my whole family knew I had another son, and they would treat him like a nephew, an uncle. My mom would treat him like a grandson. He had everything that my kids had coming. Nobody treated him any differently. It was all good. He was part of the family. So I was kind of heated, hearing his biological mom, which I don't know their situation. I don't know why he was in a foster home. I don't know none of that. What I do know is Sergio wanted the family atmosphere. He wanted sisters and brothers. He wanted father figure. He wanted all that. And he was happy with us. And he would call us. We would go visit him. Just like, a parent's relationship with a child was. So we knew he was happy. And he knew that we were proud of him because he got his apartment. He had a job. He knew that. So when his biological mom told me not to go over there, I was kind of pissed off about it. But I respected her wishes. And his foster mom, which to this day we still are good friends, I told her about it. And she also said, don't go over there. She said, because I know something happened. And if something happened and his roommate, Sergio's roommate, had something to do with it, she said, I know what you would do. And I don't want that. Well, like I said, my phone, I'm still using my phone because I'm still starting off of this. But it's going to cut off because the recording is not going to allow me to go any further because of my storage. So I'm going to have to make a part 2, which will be right after I post this one. I'll make a part 2. So I hope you come back and to finish the story with me. Okay, peace.